Hello and welcome to today's lesson. Today we are going to learn English. I'm hoping you're fine wherever you are. My name is Mr. Kevin Ananagwe, and I'm hoping you're being quarantined and you're washing your hands regularly with soap, of course, with running water. Now, from home, we hope you'll be learning and enjoying the lesson today, because today we are going to learn about something which is very interesting in English, and actually we are going to learn about oral literature. Now, as we might have heard about this before, we are just going to recuperate from where we actually left and move on and pick the pieces from there. Now, whenever we hear English and then we hear oral literature, now these are two words which are actually opposite. Oral, from the word oral, means verbal, something spoken. Now, literature comes from the word literate or literacy. Now, literacy comes from writing. Now, realize these words are actually the opposite. Now, what do we really mean when we actually come up with the term oral literature? Now, in fact, we should begin by definition. What is oral literature per se? Now, oral literature is, now we will write this. Oral literature is words spoken, acted, sung, recited, chanted, or posed orally, Now, something I must actually say, we have already actually said the definition of oral literature. We have said is words spoken, acted, sung, or recited, or chanted, or posed orally. Now, before the coming of the white people, or before we actually became, as they say, they said we were actually backwards. So before we actually became the way we are now, or before the coming of the white people, we actually had our own forms of literature. Now, literature is things we used to do, to enjoy with our own life. Now, realize before then, writing had not been invented. Now, how did we come up with such things? We had to do this, to speak them, act them, sing them if necessary, and these were meant to make our lives interesting. Now, how did we pass this information from one person to the other? How do we still have this information? Realize this information, we have been having them from time immemorial. What do you mean by time immemorial? Writing had not been invented by this time. Now, question, why do we still have this information until now? This is how. The oral literature material is passed down from generation, or from one generation to the next through performances. Now, the fact that we still have our own culture up to now, the fact we still wear the way we wear. For example, let's speak about the Maasai people. Realize the Maasai people up to now, they actually wear shukas. If you see someone wearing a red shuka around his waist or around his shoulders, of course we come up that this must be a Maasai. If you see a man with a machete on his side with a knobkerrie, again, we assume that that is a Maasai. Now, how did they know to dress themselves like that? This is because these oral literature or artifacts were passed from their generation or from their forefathers to them through performances from time immemorial. Now, why are we learning this? What is the importance of learning literature? How is this relevant to our life now? That leads us to the next topic of today, and that is the importance of oral literature. Importance of oral literature. Why are we learning this now? Why are we bringing up these aspects now? Number one, and the most actually important role of oral literature is this, and this should be number one. Oral literature, a very important point, oral literature helps us appreciate ourselves. Now, something funny, and this goes to all we African people, we don't like being African. We are not comfortable in our skin, let alone being African. Some of us have become so white or so modern that we don't even know our own mother tongue. Something funny, some of us are very fluent when it comes to speaking Swahili or English, but when it comes to our own mother tongue, it becomes weird. In fact, we have experiences these days that if you cannot speak in English or Kiswahili, you are considered someone who is not really learned or not important. Now, is that really good? Does that mean that your own mother tongue is not important? Does that mean where we actually come from is not really considered as important? Now, what is the purpose of oral literature? It makes us appreciate who we are. Realize, before we speak English, before we speak Swahili, we are someone. We came from some origin. There is a language which we actually associate ourselves with. In fact, we should add this information. On number one, we add this information. We are able to comprehend our cultural background through oral literature. That is way of life, values, and attitudes toward life. Now, what do we mean by this? We have already said that oral literature makes us appreciate our own self, us being an identity, being who we really are. Like, for example, have you ever asked yourself why or how did we become to be who we are? For example, from this setting of ours, let us use, we have already used the Maasai culture, let us use the Somali culture. There is this kind of attire which our men usually adorn. It's like a shkanga or a shuka. They actually tie around their waist. Now, do we know why that is happening? Or we have our own way of initiation. We have some African cultures which they do circumcision. Some African cultures which have they do the removal of the 6 lower teeth. Some cultures which actually do piercings of the ear and putting some jewelry to that. Now, some people will be asking themselves, how or why are we doing this? Now, oral literature makes us to appreciate, know where all these are coming from. And that is one important function we have why we study oral literature. Now, function number 2, and this is very important, oral literature awakens one's imagination Oral literature awakens one's imagination, creativity, and wit. Now, realize this. Most of us are actually very bright. But if you don't have anything to challenge us, if there's nothing to awaken our own creativity, realize our imagination, our sense of imagination will lie. Now, what is the importance of learning oral literature? Realize this. If someone was to pose a riddle, for example, riddle, of course a riddle can. My house has no door. My house has no door. Now realize you have to think. You have to take your environment and think about it critically. What is a house which has no door? We usually know that it is not possible for you to have a house without a door. What is the purpose of the house if there is no door? The purpose of a house is for you to actually be housed in it. Now, if your house doesn't have a door, realize there's no importance of having that as a house. You have to think outside the box to come up with the imaginative kind of thinking for you to come up with a resolution or an answer for this particular question. Now realize this. The answer to this is it a cup? Now, we realize a cup has an entrance. So of course this is not a cup. Is it a real house? No. We actually realize every house has a door. So what is this that is a house? It houses something and doesn't have a door. Think about it. An egg. Yeah, an egg is a house of, let's say, of a young one of maybe a bird, right? It lives inside the egg before it is actually hatched. Now, before it is hatched, realize it's a house of this chick or this little bird, and it has no door. Now, realize you have actually thought for you to come up with an answer. There's another one. Riddle. My daughter is thorny and has a crown. My daughter is thorny and has a crown. Now, what is this that is thorny and has a crown? Think of it. Is it a normal, really human being? Can human being have a female human being for that per se? Can a female human being have thorns and at the same time have a crown? Is it completely true? No. Is it a bottle? Now realize this bottle has a crown. Yes. A bottle top, let's assume that is a crown. Now, is it thorny? No, it isn't. Now, what is this daughter of mine that is thorny and has a crown? Think of it. Oh, a pineapple. Now realize, yes, a pineapple is kind of thorny and has a crown. Now, when you say oral literature awakens one's imagination, creativity, and wits, it's true. It makes actually our students or young ones think outside the box. So you can say, e.g., sorry, e.g. through riddles, proverbs. Proverbs can also be another way where one has to think. We have said riddles, proverbs, and puns. Now, all these are genres of oral literature, as we'll come to see in the next topic as we move on. So, function number 2 of oral literature, we say it is to awaken one's imagination and creativity. Really, really important. Number 3, again, another important point, it enables one to contribute. It enables one to contribute towards social, the pen is a little bit faint, towards, number one, to contribute towards socio-economic enables one to contribute towards socio-economic and political development of the country. So it enables, I'll just read this out unless in case it's not being seen very well, it enables one to contribute towards socio-economic and political development of a country Now, different genres of oral literature, and in fact this is very famous, especially in Africa, have been used to make awareness or to improve awareness on some certain things which might not be really known or wants to be informed. For example, recently we have had, it can be socio-economic. Social realize comes from the word social. Economic is economical. Economic means, okay, social, let's begin from social. Social means how we socialize with each other and what we do on a normal day life. Economic is how we earn our daily bread. And then political, as we know, is politics. Now, recently we have had the coronavirus, and I'm hoping you're actually being safe and you're quarantined wherever you are. There are some artists who have come and sat down and composed songs so that they can raise the awareness about the pandemic we are having right now in the country. Like there is a Kamba song, or there's even some Swahili songs which have been created to ensure that we actually know what we're doing during these days of the coronavirus. For example, we are being informed about the quarantine, to quarantine yourself. You're being told about how to wash your hands at least 20 seconds, use sanitizers, as we can see, use soap, as we are told. Now, these songs, realize, are informing us of our social lives or day to day. Now, if someone did not actually know there's something called the coronavirus, if you sing in your own mother tongue and your audience are listening to your song, of course they become aware. Now, politicians have also been very well using this tactic to make sure that they embrace or they actually get the persuasion in the people that they need. There are some people who have come up with songs praising some politicians, and some have also come up with songs criticizing some politicians. So it can work both ways, and that is function number 3, very important. As they say, literature is a mirror. Yeah, it mirrors our own society. So moving on, number 4, function of oral literature. We have a number, like 10 functions. I'll mention just a number. So number next. That should be number 4. Oral literature. Oral literature helps us to decipher. Helps us to decipher, in bracket, know our history. Decipher, in brackets, know our history. Our history. As from our studies, in Form 1 we learned that there is always a relationship between one subject and the other. Now, as we see here, I don't think my pen is legible enough, so I'll have to read this. Oral literature helps us to decipher, in bracket, know our history. Now, history is the study of man's past events. Now, how do we really know about our history? How did we come to learn, for example, the Luos? They have three subgroups, Jokajok, Jokowini, and Jokomolos. Now, it's from literature. For example, what do I mean that literature makes us know our own history? For example, there is something we call narratives. And in this narrative, we have what we call, as we will see later, legend narratives. Like in the Luo society, there was a very renowned legend known as Fumo Waliongo. Now, just a minute. Ebu nitio yo. Kidogo. Yes, I'm teaching today. Pause, I'm coming. Itabidi umepause kidogo. As you were saying, the oral literature helps us to decipher our history. We know about ourselves, like the legend of Fumolyongo. He was one of the most strongest people in a society. He actually helped his people from their problems. There's other places where we actually decipher from our history. We come to understand about the people who we really are in the past. Number 5, which is a function of oral literature. Number 5, it is a way of instructing. It is a way of instructing members. It is a way of instructing members of the society. Members of the society, way of instructing members of society about social customs, and values in both formal and non-formal. Both formal and non-formal setups. Now, realize as humans or as a living human being, you must have values in life. For example, there are things which we expect you to do, and there are some things which you're not really expected to do as a person in a society. Now, in oral literature teaches us values. Like there are things which you're not really expected to do in life when you're living with people. Now, in oral tradition or in oral literature, there are things which they used to call taboos. Yeah. Now, taboos were things that you're not supposed to be doing. They are like, for example, talking to a grown-up in a bad way is something they used to call a taboo. Now, realize in social growing of setups, there are some things which you're not supposed to actually do, and there's some customs which you're supposed to be following. For example, the customs of marriage. Yeah, and marriage in those days was a man marrying a woman. These days, we don't have values, we don't have customs. That's why we actually hear about the other kind of marriage, where you're hearing a girl marrying another girl, which is not among the values that we used to have as Africans. Now, oral literature actually teaches people about the values that we expect from a person living in our community. Now, function number 6, which is rather very important, as I've said, I'll only mention a number because of time. We'll only mention a few because time is not on our side. So, custom number 7. Custom number 7 is this. The material, when I say the material, I'm referring to the material in the oral literature. So the material is derived. The material is derived from the immediate, environment, Hence, it enables us to understand. Our surroundings. And society. Now, the example we gave earlier, for example, my house has no door. Now, realize from our society, we actually come up with something like an egg. Now, egg are things that come from our society. Look at this. Like, let's say my daughter has a crown and she's thorny. Now, this is our environment. Look at this. That's the pineapple. If we are farmers, then of course we assume a farmer knows what a pineapple is. So that is a very important, in fact, it makes us aware about our own environment as humans. Function number 8, as we have said, function number 8, it is used for political mobilization. Now, as we know, in Africa or wherever we live or we come from, we actually have politicians in our society. Now, how do they become famous? How did you know who is your famous or your favorite politician? Ask yourself, how did you come to know of this politician? We have known of people who have already said, constructed songs praising some certain political leader because of something they did for society or something they are known for. So I don't think that one needs so much explanation. There is number 9, which is very important. Oral literature is used for entertainment and socialization. Now, I will have to explain something. I am aware some of us, or actually most of us, are the millennial kind of children. We were born when we have electricity, we have phones, we have TVs, the internet, the Wi-Fi. In fact, I am very sure now, if the Wi-Fi was to go off, some of us, it's like the end of the day. If the power was to go out, we are bored. Now, before the coming of power, before the coming of Netflix, before you have Wi-Fi, the coming of Wi-Fi, we did not have any other thing for entertainment. Now, our old folks had to come up with something for entertainment. Now, let's say after a very long day of hard work and toil, how do you actually come back and relax? They had their own ways of relaxation. And how do they relax? Oral literature. For example, all the children were supposed to be gathering at their grandma's house in the evening. Now, what will grandma do with them? Grandma will sit them down and then, let's say, tell them a story. And before that, other cousins will tell you some, let's say, riddles, proverbs, and those kind of things. In fact, grandma will teach them some songs which they used to sing in the earlier days before the coming or before they were born. Then you have already said also socialization. As I said, what is the meaning of socialization? We are human beings, as I said before, we have to socialize. Now, socialization, these days we meet in school and socialize. We meet on social media, Facebook, chatting, WhatsApp, groups, whatever. That's how we socialize these days. Now, ask yourself, how did we used to socialize in the day before the coming of WhatsApp and WhatsApp groups? We also used to socialize only in person. Now, realize when you go to your grandma's house, all of you will have to go there. You, your cousins, your brothers, your sisters will have to meet there. Now, before grandma start telling us stories, we'll have to talk to each other. And that's what we call socialization, which is one of the most important functions that we have of oral literature. Now, another function of oral literature, which is also very important, number 10, and I think this, we have so many more, but I'll mention 10 for now, helps in language development, helps in language development, pronunciation, and vocabulary. Now, wherever you come from, there's usually a language that you used to speak. Now, how do we ensure that our language pronunciation is on point? Now, there are some things they used to employ, and that is oral literature, to ensure we as a children or as a community are well versed in the pronunciation. For example, they use things like tongue twisters. For example, Betty Butter bought some butter, but the butter was bitter. So Betty bought some better butter to actually supplement the bitter butter. Now realize, if your pronunciation is not correct, you'll miss out on the bitter and butter. Another one, if two witches are watching two watches, which witch will watch which watch? If two witches are watching two watches, which witch will watch which watch? Try saying that 5 times in a very high speed and realize what we mean by pronunciation. Now, there's some sounds in pronunciation which are very hard to pronounce. How do you make sure that you are perfect with the pronunciation? Of course, you have to employ the use of what we call tongue twisters. Now, this is just to mention a few, the functions or the importance of oral literature in our day-to-day life. There are more, but for now I think 10 is more than enough. We'll move on to some other subtopic under oral literature, and this is a very interesting topic. Ask yourself, where do we get oral literature? Where did we come up with all these things? Why do we have legends? Why do we have songs? Next subtopic, sources of oral literature. Sources of oral literature. Very important. Sources of oral literature. Where do we get this oral literature from? Number one, from social activities. What do we mean by social activities? I.e., weddings, funerals, etc. Now, as we said, we are social human beings. At one particular time, we'll have to communicate with one another or socialize. One of the events where we get oral literature from is through social activities. They include weddings and funerals. I'm aware, though right now during this period of Corona, these are not actually allowed to be taking place. But I'm very sure, at least at one time, you have ever been told about or seen a wedding situation. Now, when people are in weddings, there are some songs they sing. These songs are usually used to praise either the bride or the groom. The same happens in funerals. Now, realize the things we do. We have said oral literature is a mirror of society, the things we actually see on a daily life. In funerals, people do different things. They chant, they jump, they do things, they sing. Now, all these are meant to condone with the family which is mourning the loss of the loved one. There is number 2, political activities. Like you have said, songs that are sung during political events. Now, from political, we come from, when we have all of us have been to a political rally or political event or political situation. We can see whenever there is a political activity, there is some people who do things like singing, speaking, chanting. Number 3, from economic activities. Now, we both know that all of us come from different backgrounds and different economic backgrounds. Some of us are traders, some of us are farmers, some of us are raiders. Yeah? For example, the Maasai had a chant they used to sing when they were going to raid other societies. These were just meant to boost their morale on how they should not fear as they are going to raid. Now, next. Surrounding features. Surrounding features. Now, what do we mean by surrounding features? For example, hills, valleys, mountains, rivers. We said of, let's say this, riddles. We come up with riddles from our surrounding environment. For example, the egg, the pineapple, all of them had to be derived from our immediate environments. Those are just to mention a few, the sources where we get our oral literature from. Now, these are particularly the sources where we will come up with the oral literature. Now, this is just where oral literature is. How do we collect oral literature? Now, that leads us to the next subtopic. How do we now, from those environments, how do we collect what we call oral literature? That leads us to the next subtopic. Let me just rub here so that we can both write. Now, and that leads us to the next subtopic, methods of collecting oral literature. Very important. Methods of collecting oral literature. Now, whatever we have mentioned here is where it's found. How do we go and gather that and come back with it? Number 1, through listening. Yeah? You can just go there and listen. See what they are doing. See how they are chanting. See how they are behaving. And then you collect your own data. Number 2, participation. Now, what do we mean by participation? Some of us come from these particular social, like for example, where I come from, when you have to be circumcised, you have to sing some songs, you have to dance in the morning, wee hours in the morning. So if you participate in these things, then you actually know them. So the next way of knowing these oral literature sources is through participation. Number 3, which is one of the modern ones, writing down. So you can go there, after experiencing, you sit down and write all those you have been told or listening to. Number 4, recording on audio or visual devices. Now, depending on your ability or depending on what you have, you can actually go to the ground. Let's say this, we want to investigate about the culture of, let's say, the Luo people. Yeah? Let's see how they live. Let's see how they sing. Let's say, or the Luya people. Let's see how they live, how they do with their lives. Now, for example, there are things that the Luya people used to do. One of them includes the bullfighting. Now, when they take their bulls for fighting, there are some things or songs they used to sing and chant to their bulls. These songs are just meant to entertain and make their bulls more invigorated when it comes to the fighting in those matches. Then another way of collecting this data, number 5, is through interviews. Now, you can sit down with old people Ask them questions about their culture, things you may want to know about their culture. For example, in the Luo place, there's a river which sank. Now you can ask them about this river. Ask them about their culture. Ask them how they participate in the initiation, how they get married. So that one is through interviews. You have to sit down with one of the people who know more about the culture, and they'll have to tell you more about it. Next is through observation. Now, what do we mean by observation? Observation means you just walk there, and then what you just have to do is sit down and see. Whatever you see on your own, then that you have recorded as your own literature. Number 7, another way, what we called a questionnaire. Now, a questionnaire, you have to prepare a form. Now, in this form, you leave some blanks where your sources of oral literature have, or the people you have as your source, they'll have to fill these forms. And then from those questionnaires, you'll have to come up with the information about what you actually want to know. Now, there are so many ways you can actually collect data, but again, because of time, I'll only mention 7, which I think is more than enough. Now, basically, up to now, you should know the methods of collecting data, the sources of oral literature, the importance of oral literature. And then I'm moving on to another important part or topic when it comes to oral literature. Now, as we have already mentioned, that oral literature is to be said orally. Now, by oral, we mean there's someone who is supposed to perform it. Someone is supposed to say it. We call this person an artist. Now, let us look at the artist and see what we mean when we call them artists. So the next topic is the artist. What do we mean by the artist? Let us define the artist. This is a person. This is a person who composes or performs an oral literature. Composes or performs an oral literature item, e.g., songs. Now, because we come from a modern era, there are some things you might not know when I say the artists. I am very sure up to now you're familiar with TVs. Have you ever asked yourself this one question? There are particular people, you always see them in every particular movie, any particular program, you'll see them repeating, although they come in as different characters. Why are they the ones being repeated in every scenario? Because they are artists. So who is an artist? This is a person who either composes or performs an oral literature item, for example, songs. Now, these are people who have the ability to perform these particular genres. The same thing used to happen in the olden days. There were particular people in our society given a particular job in that society, and their job was just to perform. In fact, there are some people who were carried to war, like the legend of Hercules. Again, I hope you know who Hercules was. Now, Hercules, it was said he was the son of who? Zeus, a god. Now, really, they said he came from, the mother was a human, the father was a god. Now, he used to go to wars. When he used to go to war, how do we know about his wars? Now, Hercules used to carry himself an artist. The purpose of this artist was basically to observe. As we said, one of the ways of collecting data in oral literature is observation. Now, the purpose of this person was just to sit. In fact, he was one of the convoys which were very protected. But the function of him, or his function was just to see and observe the war. And when they come back, his purpose was just to narrate how the war was. Now realize these days we have cameras which can actually carry and record, but in those days we had to have an observer, and his sole purpose was meant to observe. Now, they include, we have different names for these guys in different genres of oral literature. For example, Roman 1, in narratives. And we'll see what a narrative is. They are called storytellers. In narrative, we call them storytellers, or a narrator. Storyteller or narrators. In poems, we call them poet. That is, if they are male. Poetess, if or in the event that they happen to be female. You know, these days our language has to be gender sensitive. If you're giving it for a male name, you have also to mention that for female folks. That is, we have said if it's in poems, we call them poets. If there is a man, a poetess, if she's a lady. If it's a song, we call them singer. Singer or singer, whichever you want to pronounce it is. So the person who will be performing a song, we call them a singer. Then if it is a riddle, now, realize, as we'll see later on, for you to have a riddle, you must have two parties. And these parties we call the challenger Now, the challenger is the one who posts the riddle, and the respondent is the one who answers the challenge. You can never perform a riddle sorry for that, as a one party. Now, which qualities? What are the things that we look for? How do you qualify to be an artist? What things must you have for you to be considered an artist? That leads us to the next subtopic, and that subtopic is qualities. Qualities of a good artist. What must you have? What are the things we look for? How do you qualify to be called an artist? And number one, they should be able, he or she, as I was saying, should be able to retain and recall correctly the past performances. You should have a very, very high percentage, what you call GBs these days. Like you have phones, let's say this. If your phone is 1 GB, realize the memory of that phone will be very low. But if you have a 362 GB, now that is the phone you're talking about. If your brain should have a capacity to remember whatever things you actually did in the past. Number next, which is very important, should be well versed. Should be well versed with the people's, should be well versed with the people's culture, and tradition. Now, what do I mean by this? If you're performing in front of, let's say, the Somali people, you should know the culture of the Somalis. You should know the ways and tradition of these people. Now, it is important. Why? Realize you've already said that oral literature helps us to actually keep or maintain our own culture. Now, if you don't have the knowledge about their tradition, it will be very difficult for you to perform in an audience of that particular of particular tradition. In fact, in the olden days, artists were particular to each society. Next. And which is number 4. Before function is should be before function or characteristic, sorry, should be fluent. Should be fluent. Should be fluent, or what we call articulate. Fluent or articulate in his or her language. Now, what do we mean by this? If you want to, let's say, perform in English, like I'm doing now, I cannot speak or perform in English if I don't know the language. So the first step should be knowing or mastering the language. I should be articulate in that particular language. Now, there are people who are sometimes stammerers, right? Now realize if you're a stammerer, for you to actually perform an oral tradition, let's say you're performing a narrative, and as we actually will know later on, a narrative is a very long prose kind of narration. Now for you to perform in this one, it will take you a lot of time. Why? It's very long, and maybe you are a stammerer, that can actually hinder you from performance, right? I.e., in fact, additional information to this one, i.e., this should be have a mastery, of its idioms, and figures of speech. Now, in your delivery, when you're still performing, you should use idioms, proverbs, sayings, and those kind of things in order to make your narration very interesting. Next, that should be function number 5. Should enjoy entertaining the audience. Should enjoy entertaining the audience. Now, what do we mean by this? You should actually find a way of finding a happiness, entertaining. There are these people who, the moment they stand up, whatever they are saying is boring. Now, if you're a bore, realize even your audience will be bored by your performance. Now, the best thing you should do, or you should be someone who enjoys entertaining the audience, and that one will make your performance to be very, very enjoyable. Next. Should be confident. Should be confident and assertive. Should be confident and assertive. Now, what do we mean by this? There are these people, when they go in front of people or a crowd of people, what they do is this. Now, realize, if you cannot face your audience, if you're not confident in yourself, if you fear, even your delivery will be affected. You can be a very nice person when it comes to performance. You might have a lot of content. You might know what you want to say. You might be very vibrant. But the problem comes in if you cannot actually deliver whatever you're saying out of fear, then even your performance will not be as effective as you may want it to be. So you must be very confident and very assertive. Assertive person, what do we mean by an assertive person? An assertive person is a person who knows what he wants and how he wants it done. We call that kind of person assertive. So that is assertiveness, very important. I will give up to number 10. I think there are more than that, but I will only give 10 because, again, of time. So number 7, should be able to condemn, should be able to condemn what is socially unacceptable and promote virtues in a society. Now, what do we mean by this? If you are actually a performer or an artist, we have already said that oral literature was used as a mirror. What do you mean by a mirror? It reflects what goes on in a society. Now, if you are a good social or what we call artist, you should be able to condemn those things that are going wrong, socially wrong, or unjust in that society, and actually exalt those things that we call virtues, the good things that are going on in the society. You shall actually exalt them and condemn those things that are wrong. That is number 7. Number 8, should be able to use what we call verbal cues. What do we mean by verbal cues? Verbal cues. So write this, e.g., or such as tonal variation, stress. Now, what do we mean by tonal variation? What is the tone? Is the highness or the pitch, right? Like, realize I cannot only use the high pitch. I should be able to vary my tone to ensure that you actually keep on understanding. There is what we call stress. As we learned in Form 2, stress is the emphasis we use on a particular word or sentence or syllable in a word. So you should also to use stress. Now, how do you use stress? Regarding on what you want to be stressed in that sentence or in that word, you can use stress. Then there is intonation. Right? We know the intonation is the rise and fall of the voice. Voice projection. Now, you should also be loud. What do we mean by voice projection? When you're speaking, like right now, you should be able to hear what I am actually saying. So for you to be actually audible is very, very important. And what we also call non-verbal cues. Again, this one we learned in Form 2. Non-verbal cues includes, e.g., facial expressions. And please don't confuse facial expressions with what we call gestures. Now, facial expressions includes a frown, a wink, a smile, those kind of things. So facial expressions. Under nonverbal cues, we also have gestures. We have mimicry. Now, what does mimicry mean? Mimicry means imitating what you're supposed to. Let's say this. You are ought to stay, and the hare said, let's jump. Realize your voice should actually imitate. Like, for example, if you're talking about a lion in this or narrative for viewers, ensure a lion actually speaks as a lion. Now, if it's a lion, we assume a lion should have like a very hoarse voice. The lion said, come here, right? as we usually know, a lion roars, so you should be able to mimic these kind of things so that you can actually make your audience enjoy. And then, and what we call dramatization appropriately. Dramatization appropriately. Now, realize, if you're dramatizing, then your dramatization should be appropriate. You cannot dramatize something which is not as actually what you say. So what do you mean by appropriate dramatizing? If you're dramatizing to walk as a hare, you should walk like a hare or like a kangaroo. Now, that's what we actually mean like when we say appropriate dramatization. Number 9, which is very, very important, should be open to criticism. Should be open to criticism and receptive to feedback. Now, as we all know, we are all humans, and as humans, we might make mistakes here and there. It's normal. So what do we mean by this? You might find there is a place which you have done something wrong. So if someone comes and says you have to correct here and there, you have to consider whatever the person is saying. Now, I'll have to wind it up to, here today because of time. We will continue this next time. What you have to remember is this. As a summary of what you have done today, you should remember the definition of what oral literature is, the importance, at least six importance of oral literature, the sources of oral literature, as we have already talked about, then how to collect, at least again 4 ways of collecting oral literature, then artist, you should know who an artist is, and or a storyteller or a poet or a singer, and then qualities, at least 6 good qualities of a good artist. Up to that point, I think we have learned something. I hope you have added value to your oral literature and English as a whole. Good day.